from Brace to this webinar, Coping with the Costs of Care. I'm Stephen Lisney, I'm Chair of the Trustees of Brace, and we're pleased to welcome this morning Mark Stone, who is a chartered financial planner with Tilney, and he's going to be giving the main part of this morning's session. We all know that we have to be careful with our money, and sometimes it's another person's money, and especially when there's a major call on our resources. For example, paying for care for perhaps ourselves or for someone close to us. And we do need advice when that situation crops up, and that's what Mark is going to say something about a little bit later. But before we go to Mark, I'm going to pinch some of his time to say a few words about Brace, just in case there's one or two of you who haven't been able to join us for any of our previous webinars. We are a dementia research charity, and our work is still just as important now as it ever was. When we have found a way of managing COVID, then sadly, dementia will re-emerge as the leading cause of death in the UK. Now, the urgency of dementia research is not new. Brace was founded just over 30 years ago, and our aims have always been fourfold. First of all, to try and find out more about the cause of this group of diseases. We know we're not thinking about just one disease. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, but it's not the only form of dementia. So we know that we have work to do to try and unravel what is triggering this group of diseases and to look for common threads that might help us to find what we really need, of course, which is treatments. So that's aim number one. What are the causes of these diseases? Two is we want to find ways of improving the diagnosis and to find practical ways of making a diagnosis as soon as possible. We now know that the changes that underlie dementia begin 5, 10, possibly even 15 years before there are any outward signs that our friends, our families might detect in us. So we need to find timely and accurate ways of making diagnosis. Third, of course, we want to find treatments, either to ease the symptoms, to slow the progress, but better still, to prevent it altogether. Our fourth aim is to share information. We want to encourage scientists and clinicians to share information with each other so we can promote the research endeavour, but we also want to share information between ourselves if we've encountered dementia, and also between ourselves as members of the public and the scientists and the clinicians. So it's trying to improve the information sharing in every direction. Now, we don't have our own set of research facilities. There's no Brace dementia research place. Instead of that, rather, we fund projects at universities in the southwest of England and in South Wales. So we have been funding projects in Bristol, in Bath, University of the West of England, Exeter and Plymouth, and in South Wales, in Cardiff and in Swansea. And the clinicians and researchers in those institutions send their ideas, their thoughts to us. We have them scrutinized by our own scientific advisory committee, but we also take advantage of the worldwide network of dementia researchers to scrutinize those proposals, and so we can identify the best ones, and then we try and find the money to fund the research. And that, of course, relies, the money that is, relies on donations, on bequests in wills, businesses that adopt us as a charity of the year, people who take on fundraising challenges, many of which unfortunately at the moment have been suspended, but they'll resume again. So a whole range of activities that provide an income that we channel to these various universities for research. If you are able to make a donation today, we would greatly appreciate it. And you can do so, of course, through the web, through our own website. Now, before Mark's presentation about the cost of care, there are just a few housekeeping points that I want to make. First, we've muted everybody. That's so that the sound of the doorbell ringing when the postman calls or the dog barking, whatever it might be, won't suddenly highlight you as center stage. So I hope you won't mind that we've taken that measure of muting everybody. With your video, it's entirely up to you whether you want to leave your video on or whether you want to switch it off. It doesn't matter. Now, you will notice that the recording light is on. We're not recording any of the participants apart from myself and Mark, and that's because some people who may not have been able to join us would value being able to see the video. They want to know what Mark has had to say, and hence it's just really for that purpose that we're making the recording. So your privacy is being respected as you might anticipate with GDPR. Now, if you have any questions or contributions that you want to make during Mark's presentation, if you could put them into the chat facility, which you'll find on the icons below the main screen, you can type them in, and then we'll take all of these at the end. So we'll get Mark to put him on the spot and answer your questions at that point. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to Mark. He will introduce himself and then give his presentation to us. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here today to present to you. Just going to share screen to bring the presentation up, so bear with me. So, as I've already been said, my name is Mark Stone. I'm a Chartered Financial Planner here at Tilney, Smith & Williamson. My presentation today is about later life planning and the funding of long-term care, and in particular for those people living with dementia. The presentation will last for approximately 15 minutes, and we will then have, as already been mentioned, time for questions at the end. So as already mentioned again, if you could type your questions at the bottom of the screen, I will ensure that they're answered at the end. So to start with, who are Tilney Smith & Williamson? As a group, we manage over 47 billion of assets under management with more than 100,000 clients. We have the knowledge and experience to look after your finances with over 180 years of experience. The business has considerable depth of expertise with 290 investment managers, 265 financial planners, and more than 140 professional service partners and directors located across an extensive network, both in the UK as well as in the Republic of Ireland and the Channel Islands. All of our teams are professionally qualified to a very high standard and well beyond the required minimum levels. Over 60% of our investment managers and financial planners hold a coveted chartered status with either the Chartered Insurance Institute for Securities and Investments or the Chartered Insurance Institute. We also have a high number of colleagues who are Society of Trust and Estate Practitioner qualified and are experts in their field. So, financial planning with dementia and ill health. As we all know, the likelihood of developing dementia increases significantly with age, with 1 in 15 people over the age of 60 and 1 in 3 by age 90 living with dementia. This disease is a significant factor when planning for the future. Once you consider the chance of getting dementia, it raises the question of how you will live and not just how you will fund living. Whilst not all elderly people want to worry about their future care needs, having an open discussion in a supportive environment, whether between couples, where fears may be hidden or never discussed, within families, and with those who may have no one obvious left, shows any preconceptions and enables all of us to pick out what is important to us. Once you've considered your own future or own personal future of a dementia-based elderly age, it is clear that lifestyle questions become the basis for their decisions. These range from the following: whether your home would remain suitable, is it the location right, is the style right, is the size right, the proximity of family members, and will they help? If care is needed, what type of care? Will that be care at home or care in a home? If a care home, what type of care home is required? Whether the surviving partner remains in the family home? What if both within a couple has a form of dementia? Understanding what is important regarding care and autonomy decisions, and have you told others how you feel and what you want? Following on from understanding your own personal future of a life with dementia, we need to look at what is out there that can assist with your financial planning needs for the future. As you can see from the charts, there is a widespread variation in the number of cases across the country, with all areas having a significant number of cases, and the numbers will only get higher as the years go by. It is estimated that there are currently 850,000 people living with dementia. The takeaway from this chart is that it is expected that over 2 million people will be living with a form of dementia by 2051, which is a frightening statistic and is the reason we are here today. We help people plan for the inevitable and the possible, which is of course dementia. We encourage you to consider the important paperwork called lasting powers of attorney, both health and finance, as well as plan to have enough money to last throughout your life, and to have talks to your next of kin, the next generation, about what you want at the end of your life. We can put you in touch with a suitable legal professional to do this if you do not already have one yourself. Our aim is to make sure our clients have the tools and knowledge about the type of death they want. Legislation has significantly changed to empower individuals to take control over how they want their later life and their death to be. But what has not changed is the cultural view on death. We still talk to families where they do not have the conversation around the end of life, even though it is inevitable. We hear clients talk about the death of family members where uncertainty and fear of getting it wrong is predominant. But it does not have to be like this. It can be very different. In our line of work, the greatest fear amongst our clients is that a long period of care is needed for situations such as dementia and at the end of life. Dementia is now the greatest cause of death in the UK, having taken over from heart disease. Dying with or from dementia generally results in a period of time where increased care is needed, either within a professional environment or from the family members. So dying matters even with dementia, or maybe especially with dementia. In our view, our clients should all decide who they believe will support them to achieve the death they would like. Do not assume that everyone wants the same ending, and do not assume that your next of kin knows the answer. As this slide shows, we are able to offer a wide range of complementary services. And as you can see, we can cater for all of these requirements and outcomes. Depending on a client's requirements, we will help with some or indeed all of these, and we will put together a financial plan based upon your requirements. Where we do not offer a service directly, we will work with a broad range of other professionals who have the expertise in their chosen field to ensure you receive the right outcomes and help to provide a well-rounded solutions. A good example of this are wills and powers of attorney. I think the best way to demonstrate this is to use a case study on the impact of dementia or ill health on a client's financial situation. So to set the scene, this slide sets out something that a lot of our clients have experienced in the past. Our client has been diagnosed with dementia. There are initial costs to complete home improvements and to adapt the home for future use. The condition is managed with medication, with help from family, and of course some part-time care. In later years, the cost increase significantly as family members can no longer cope with the person at home, and care needs are managed professionally full-time. In this case, our client remains in their home to avoid distress and disruption. The starting point for us with any type of financial planning where capital and income is required on an ongoing basis is to produce a financial plan, otherwise known as a cash flow model, based on a client's own particular requirements and based on their own particular circumstances. What this chart is detailing is the outflow of capital that is required in the run-up to someone needing care, in this case in the home, and shows the cost of adapting the family home at the age of 83, with ongoing cost of care each year until the age of 90, when it gets too much for the family members to carry on the care required on their own. From age 90, this shows the subsequent increase in costs to pay for full-time care until eventual death. We've used an average cost of care, which in most cases is still well in excess of £50,000 per annum. The previous slide gave details of the cost of care in terms of income and expenditure on an income and capital basis. This slide shows the effect on assets of paying for care and taking into account those outflows. The modelling shows the initial reduction in assets from the age of 83 until the age of 90, and the acceleration of the reduction in assets from age 90 onwards when full-time care is required. The takeaway from this is that there are still funds left at the age of 94, which is beyond average life expectancy. This is where we believe that professional financial planning advice can help our clients, as we feel we are well placed to help clients plan for this eventuality, both before care is required and on an ongoing basis with regular reviews of our clients' circumstances when care is needed. We will take into account all the relevant sources of assets and provide advice on the most tax-efficient way that funds should be used, including the order in which they are taken and from which asset first. We will ensure that within the ongoing review of the financial plan that our client remains as tax efficient as possible to help prolong the assets they have to continue the payment of care. So what about investment solutions as part of that financial plan? As a company, we can provide a solution for all clients, starting with those clients who feel comfortable managing their own affairs via the Best Invest online platform, to those who want to be involved in the investment solutions and feel they would benefit from having the input of an investment specialist via the investment advisory service. And finally, for those clients who prefer to have all investment decisions made for them via the core investment management service or the fully bespoke personalised investment management service. We will be on hand to help guide and advise our clients which of these solutions we feel is most suitable based on a client's own individual circumstances, as all advice is centred around them. So why would you choose us to manage your investments and help provide this sort of advice? Here are just a few reasons why we believe we are the right company to take care of our clients' needs now and into the future. We have one of the highest number of investment and financial planning services in the UK, so we can help our client whatever they need. We have one of the widest range of qualified financial planning and investment experts. You can be confident that you're working with one of the best. That is why our staff are prepared to invest their own money with us and why so many of our clients recommend us to their family and friends. We work closely with trusted professional advisors such as tax, legal and corporate financiers to ensure our clients receive a fully integrated wealth management service. We combine our strong local expertise in the UK with access to a wide range of global services from our strategic partners. We have vast experience of working with professionals and partners in law, accountancy and corporate finance firms. So what would you expect from us? We put all of this together by putting in place a robust, personalised financial plan. We provide ongoing management of your investments to ensure they remain suitable for your needs. We will do this by utilising our extensive in-house research expertise. You will receive quarterly valuations and have the ability to go online via the My Tilney portal. We will provide regular reviews both within it, an advisor and an investment manager, if appropriate, and we will work with other professionals to ensure that your affairs are structured effectively. And above all else, we will offer you the highest level of care and expertise. Our role and how we would support you with this, I mean, as I've already said, we will work with you to understand your circumstances and needs. We will make that financial plan as personalised as possible. We will then test and review the model scenarios for the future, both initially and on an ongoing basis. We will help you facilitate informed choices so that you can agree compromises. What can you afford to do? What can't you afford to do? What can you do? What can't you do? We will also provide the best possible outcome for our clients. That's our aim, is that all of our clients are in the best possible place, both now and in the future. Thank you for listening to me. As I said, we will have time for questions. Thank you, Brace, for allowing me to make this presentation. And the usual important information: nothing in this webinar is intended to constitute advice or a recommendation, and you should not take any investment decisions based on its content. The value of investments and the income derived from it can go down as well as up, and investors can get back less than the amount they originally invested. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that you found that useful. Over to Stephen for questions, if there are any. And I'll stop sharing.
Fine, good. Well, we haven't got any, I've got some questions. We haven't got any questions in the chat line first, but I could understand the sense, although I imagine it can be very difficult for families to actually face up to what seems to be the sort of rather cold reality of a sort of cash flow analysis model, which is making a prediction on the lifespan of possibly yourself or your loved one or somebody for whom you have accepted responsibility.
Yeah.
I can see the sense to that, and I can see how from that there has to be a model for the management of the assets that the person holds. But how flexible are these arrangements? Because, for example, in the little example that you showed, the person had 6 or 7 years when they were at home before things became difficult and the family couldn't cope.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure that the model will be absolutely fine if the person, if their condition doesn't cause their health and their safety to deteriorate.
Yeah.
But what happens when it comes earlier than had been planned? So you'd been hoping that there might be 7 years, let's say.
Yeah.
But what happens if then the family find they can't cope after 4 years?
Exactly what you just said. I mean, with all the modelling that we do, it's a track to run on. So we start the model, we set the model up at the start. Then what we'll do is every year we will go back and as a minimum and review that model to make sure that it still matches and still looks like what the client's requiring. What we will also do is, and what we can do is change that model at any stage. So in your example, or in the example, it was 7 years. If it turned out that it was 4 years that things got worse and there was more care required or more help required, then we can change the model to show what happens or what the effect of that is, but bringing all those calculations forward. So yes, it's fully flexible, and within the service that we offer, it will change on a on a year by year or even indeed a month by month basis if needed.
Right. Okay. Good. Now we have some questions.
Oh, good.
Jen Windsor has asked, when is the best time for people to come to you, Mark, for you to become involved in helping a family with these, I'll say, longer term planning thoughts?
Going to sound like a very cliched answer, as soon as possible, really. The earliest possible chance we can get in, or we can, start speaking with the family members. We can then start putting the financial plan together, whenever they're ready, really. If it's something that someone is starting to have ill health, or even deep before that, a financial plan can be constructed and then changed at any stage to factor in the issues that come along the way. So the simple answer is as soon as possible. The longer answer is as soon as it's practically possible, we can create that financial plan, and then we can make the changes as we go along. When we get to the knowns, as Donald Rumsfeld said, that we can get to that position whereby we know exactly what's going on, and then we can make the change to that financial plan there afterwards.
Okay, and Emma has asked, what would you expect the minimum, in terms of money, I think Emma must mean, a person would require to have available in order for the advice to be relevant, helpful?
I suppose it's any amount, but of course, as we all know, there's a certain amount of assets that you need to have before you start paying for care. We can put a financial plan together for any size of assets. There isn't a minimum figure that we would use, but we can put together a financial plan for anyone. To make it cost effective for anyone, probably £250,000 or more is kind of the baseline figure that we talk about. But no, a financial plan could be put together for anybody, depending on what their circumstances are, if indeed it's the right thing for us to do for them.
It's an expression which I'm sure is not going to be new to people, but amongst people my age that I know, we often talk about how we're asset rich but cash poor, in the sense that many of us have a house, which is our major asset, which is because what's happened with house prices is really, it's a big asset.
It is.
But we're cash poor in the sense that we live with a pension, which is not flexible. It pays a fixed amount every month. And yes, there's a cost of living allowance, but there's no flexibility within the pension payment system to help us to cope. Now, there are all sorts of strategies, I'm sure, for converting the asset into something which can be used. And you may have a view on them, but I know there have been some, I'll say, alarming articles about equity release plans, for example. So what would be the sorts of things that you would discuss with a family who fall into this category of being asset rich? In other words, there's a house that possibly could be sold, or maybe that's not the best thing for it, but don't have a lot of flexibility with what is coming in each week, each month.
It's a very good question. It's one that we have regularly. The starting point will always be, speak to the local authority, find out what their view on everything is, because again, we've seen situations whereby local authorities have allowed a debt to be kind of offset against the house rather than selling it. The wider options, you've already mentioned them. Yes, there's lifetime mortgage, there's equity release. As a company, it's not something that we do, but again, as we said, we deal with professionals who deal with that. Equity release, there's two schools of thought on that. There's the one side that it's the product of last resort and should only be used as a last resort. There's the other side that has been used for other reasons, such as gifting, for family members, etc. But in terms of paying for care, then yes, it's something we would speak with both, professionals, i.e. the people who can deal with the equity release, straight lifetime mortgage, but also solicitors and the family members. Because at the end of the day, with those alarming stories that we've all seen, where someone's got a house that with the build-up, especially from the equity release model, when there's a build-up that asset against it, it's how the next generation feel about that there could be an asset that diminishes dramatically over a long enough period of time. So no, it's a conversation that we would have, and we would involve all parties to do so, to make sure the outcome is there for everybody.
You mentioned powers of attorney.
Yes.
And we've had webinars about powers of attorney. Are there any instances where people think they've done all the right things. They've got the will, they've got powers of attorney and so forth, but still get other sorts of areas that we could still get into trouble with.
I think,
Asking for your comfort words, really.
Yeah, there are, and there's always going to be those situations whereby you think you sort of dotted every I and crossed every T, and there's always going to be those left field scenarios that it's things like ownership of assets. Are the assets owned in the right way that the will or power of attorney don't cater for? So yes, I mean there are kind of instances where this happened, but that's why we kind of say to everyone that we will review as part of that ongoing review process, and as part of dealing with ourselves, we will always suggest people speak to solicitors to deal with both wills and powers of attorney to make sure they're set up in the right way and that all assets are catered for. So yes.
In follow-up to you remember Emma's question,
Yes.
There are a couple of follow-ups to that.
Yes.
Wendy's asked whether the £250,000 that you referred to, whether it had to be in cash or could it be in other forms of assets? Can that still be
both
managed in some way or other?
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about assets, it is exactly that. It's anything, whether it be cash, whether it be investments, whether it be pensions, whether it be property. We will take it all into account, and we can build the model around the whole asset class. And we'll include things like state pensions, and we will always suggest everyone speak to or ensure that any state benefits are available are available and are taken up.
And Valerie has also touched on the sort of asset rich, cash poor.
Yeah.
She says, what if the majority of the assets are in the value of the house?
That's the most difficult one we come across, and it's I agree. I think for that it depends on whether it's a married couple. It's easier, dare I say, if it's a single person who's got a house, because then if they then end up having to go into, especially if they go into care, into a home, then you've got the option of renting the house out or selling the house down to use that asset to pay for it. It's more difficult when it's a married couple, because the situation could be that because you've got that asset, you could then have to pay for your own care, and therefore how do you fund that with that situation? But remember, there are disallowable assets with the calculation of care, and property is one of them, or can be one of them.
Now, Emerald has asked, if your financial plan was made at the start of when the diagnosis had come, but you were still able to contribute, but you then deteriorate, so you cannot make the financial decisions yourself.
Yep.
How much control does the power of attorney have if the plan had been made with Tilney? So it's really, I think, saying, how does Tilney view powers of attorney?
We deal with powers, first of all, obviously it has to be registered with ourselves. So we've got access to and know who the attorneys are and who we then need to be dealing with, whether it be one or all of the attorneys. But then afterwards, effectively, the attorneys will step into the shoes of the client, and we will deal with them in exactly the same way. And we will run the plan in exactly the same way with them as we would have done with the client. So, that change of circumstance is regular, and we've got, I can think of numerous, instances where we have powers of attorney acting for, in place of what was our client, and we deal with them exactly the same way.
So I think the important thing is that there's complete respect for
absolutely
people who have been appointed. As long as that power of attorney is good, is sound, then everything's fine.
And that's the starting point. You mentioned GDPR right at the very start. We won't deal with an attorney until we have, the right. We have copies of the right attorney in the right way, and it's registered on our systems. We won't just deal with them willy-nilly. We will wait for the evidence that we are dealing with the right person, and indeed we'll also look at the attorney to say, because some of them are jointly or severally, to make sure that there is one, if it's one or more person that we have to deal with.
Okay, well, at the moment, we don't have any other questions that have come through in the chat line. I'll just wait for a moment in case another one comes, and that has prompted another question.
Yeah, always happy to take questions.
So Wendy asks, how much do you charge for your services? Is it a percentage of the funds, or is it some other mechanism? And Wendy apologizes if you addressed this at the beginning of the meeting, but she had to join us a little bit late.
It's a very good question. And the answer is, generally speaking, it's a percentage of the assets, but we can mix and match our services to whatever a client requires. Our standard process, our standard way of dealing with things, and the way we like to deal with clients is to have regular annual meetings, because if you've got a financial plan in place, we'd like to review that on an annual basis to make sure it's still fit for purpose. If a client doesn't want to have an ongoing annual service or annual review, they don't have to have one. We can deal with clients on an ad hoc basis. So if someone says, "Look, I've got it set up, I don't need to see you for 2 or 3 years," we can cater on in that way, and we can do that on a time costed basis. So either or is, and we can be as flexible as the client wants us to.
Okay, well, I think if there aren't any other questions, I'll just keep an eye on the chat line, but I think we would all like to thank you, Mark, for your advice. I think it's always reassuring to know that there are people who can help us and who understand the situations that we may find ourselves in. And dare I say, it can be able to advise us dispassionately. It's very difficult in terms of the context of a family, because emotion and a lot of other things come into it, and it can be very helpful to have, if you like, a neutral person who is there to offer advice to a family.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'd also like to thank Amanda and Emma and Emerald from the Brace team for helping to run the webinar this morning. And of course, to all of you for joining us, for your questions and contributions. And finally, please keep safe and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Pleasure.